All right, thank you. Thanks so much to Mike Tonsetic from Blanchard Insurance for joining us. Mike and I had a recent conversation that turned into a pretty lengthy conversation, and it was on the topic of insurance. And I think most of us might assume that insurance is one of those kind of necessary evils, and how interesting could it really be? But when you talk to someone like Mike, who has a lot of passion for the industry, you find out, it actually could be pretty interesting. So, Mike, one of the things that we were talking about was your real fear for what's coming for Central Floridians with regards to perhaps being dropped or their insurance premiums going up. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, and thanks for having me, Holly. The best way to put this is historically in Florida, and a lot of consumers out there already know this without even being in the insurance industry, that what they call a tri-county or South Florida has historically been just horrible for insurance companies, going all the way back to Andrew. And it's not only that, it's been fraud, it's been claims, it's been, attorneys down there. And they've, to give you an example, probably about 90% of auto claims in Florida they go to litigation or out of South Florida. 40% of all homeowners insurance claims that involve litigation are outside of South Florida. So, tri-county per se has always had a negative connotation in the insurance industry, and a lot of carriers historically have pulled out of there, not wanting to do business. To give you an idea of the scope of what's going on in Central Florida right now, AM Best, who, as a lot of people know, monitor the financials on pretty much every insurance company in the world, they recently wrote an article a couple months ago claiming that Central Florida, quote unquote, is the new tri-county, which kind of like upset a lot of people, on the insurance side, say, what's going on. And it's really become a perfect storm here in Central Florida of having three successive years of hurricanes, going back to Matthew hitting the East Coast, to followed up by Irma, obviously, where a lot of us here in Central Florida were impacted. Even in our own agency, I'd say about 30% of our homeowners suffered claims during Irma. And then, Michael actually hitting Mexico Beach and the Panhandle up there. So they created a huge loss issue. And then even, down in the Bahamas, a lot of people think that the damage in the hurricanes didn't affect us, down there. Obviously, it didn't affect us in regards to damage, but it's affected the industry, which we're starting to see here in Florida. So when you add in the fact that we've had these major hurricanes, and you couple that with the fact that litigation regarding homeowners insurance here in Central Florida has just doubled in the last 2 or 3 years, it's just created this perfect storm that we're seeing right now.
So a lot of people, we think of litigation like I get an attorney and I go after someone, or I get an attorney and I go to sue someone. When it comes to insurance, how do attorneys get involved? How does litigation happen when it comes to an insurance claim?
When you're litigating, it doesn't necessarily mean that you as the individual are hiring an attorney to go after the other person. It's big business. What the attorneys are doing is, when it comes to litigation, is they're going after the insurance company of the defendant. So, for example, on the auto side, basically, if you get into an accident, Holly, and you do get an attorney, their pitch to you is, we're not suing Mike. We're going to go after and sue his insurance company. And usually they're trying to get as much out of that insurance company as possible. And that's really gone. Historically, we really haven't seen that on the homeowners insurance side. Most of the claims have been just handled, between the insured and, their homeowners insurance or another party's homeowners insurance. But recently, the attorneys have, I think it's just due to the amount of focus and concentration that they've had in the auto industry. I think it's dried up a little bit, and there's a lot more attorneys, obviously, nowadays. So they've really tried try to diversify. And their way of diversifying is, let's go look at homeowners insurance. Let's go look at boat insurance. Let's go look at commercial insurance. So the litigation has picked up, tremendously, and we have never seen that. But to answer your question, circle back around, when it involves litigation, it is the insured going after another party's insurance company. And it is big business. I mean, on the auto side especially, we joke around a lot of the time where you say you could probably put, one of the insurance companies on one floor in a building and some of the, bigger law firms on the floor up, and the money would just go around in a giant circle.
Yeah. And I mean, certainly there's a time and a place for these attorneys to represent insured and to represent consumers, but at Better Business Bureau, we tell consumers, if someone knocks on your door, or if you get a phone call where someone's offering you something for nothing, that should be a red flag. And the same thing goes for someone knocks on your door and says, hey, there's been roof damage in your neighborhood. Why don't we take a look and look to see if you're one of those people? Talk a little bit about people who are looking to get something for nothing out of their insurance.
Absolutely. And this is actually, a lot of people think this is something new. And it's not anything that's new. I mean, we first started seeing, and really, and the hail damage and that's most of the questions we get, most of the claims we see now are hail damage. Well, I would say going back to like 2006, like right after the storms, a lot of the roofing companies and how they did their marketing practices, and they started what they call canvassing neighborhoods. So for example, a hailstorm, let's say, moved through Oviedo. And people got to understand, when it hails in one part of Orlando, it doesn't hail on every single house in Orlando. I mean, that would be, catastrophic, active, end of day story right there.
We know that just because of rain. It can rain
exactly.
in my driveway and not rain in my backyard.
Exactly. So the first case I personally remember was when there was a hailstorm out in Oviedo, and yes, we did have some legitimate clients, clients with legitimate claims. I mean, you went out to their house, they had holes in the roof, they had water seeping through. But then kind of one of the marketing strategies was to take a look at this house. And this house was built at the time in 1995. So an architectural shingle or a composite shingle in Florida, even though they sell it to you based on it's got a 20-year life or a 30-year life, realistically in Florida, that is not the case. I mean, as you just pointed out, I mean, it seems like we have these thunderstorms at 5 o'clock, on the I-4 corridor every single day that seem like the end of the world. So, 10 years of that will make a roof look very old and tarnished really quickly, so it doesn't last 30 years. So a lot of these roofing companies took a look at that and said, well, what if I go to the neighbor's house? Because it becomes a very gray area as of what is actually hail damage, or is your roof just old and tarnished? Is it at the end of its useful life? So they realized that once that area becomes more gray and more fuzzy, the argument that we can say it's hail damage on a mass scale is a lot easier for us to convince the insurance companies.
One thing that is clear, insurance companies are in the business to make money. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yes.
But at the same time, consumers need to keep in mind that any business, and in this case,
absolutely.
insurance, if a business can't be profitable, they're going to cut their losses and go elsewhere. And it seems like that's what we're seeing in the state of Florida, where, as you mentioned, we've got some insurance companies, some large carriers backing out of the state of Florida because they just can't be profitable. Absolutely. And then others who are passing along huge rate increases. If a consumer is going to get dropped, or if they're going to receive one of these large rate increases, how will they be notified?
I'll answer that in two parts. When when you talk about getting dropped, or, you know, in the insurance, you know, side, we call it, you know, non-renewed, or even cancel. I didn't even think I'd see cancellations, but now they're starting to send out cancellation notices. In an extreme case where we recently had some insurance companies that just said here in Central Florida, hey, we're gonna, you know, tens of thousands of policyholders, we're going to drop. We can no longer, in the insurance side, they call it, on the piece of paper that actually comes in the mail, it will say something along the lines of exposure management. And really what that means is, let's take Seminole County, for example, where we both are. A company may say, look, in Seminole County, our losses are so severe that we can't take in enough premium to justify that. So if we have any additional claims, we can't afford to pay all the claims. So what they may be doing is sending the insured a letter that says, hey, we're giving you 30 days in the most extreme, and they're getting this approved by the state of Florida, by the way. They can't just send you a notice out. They have to get these mass non-renewals approved by the Office of Insurance Regulation to sign off on. So at extreme case, they'll get a letter that says 30 days, we're canceling you due to exposure management. More realistically, the insured might get something that's closer to 60, 90 days, and it may say non-renewal due to the same thing, exposure management. And then probably a best case scenario, I know there isn't a best case scenario, but as close as we can get is they say once your policy rate comes up for renewal, we're going to drop you. So, you know, that could be 6, 9 months out down the road. Now, that's just on the mass side, and the insurance companies are doing that in mass. So tens of thousands of people, maybe an entire county, maybe an entire zip code where they have a lot of, you know, homes insured there. On the other side, they're also doing it based on underwriting and loss history. Now, on the loss history, it could be, you know, that somebody had 3 or 4 water claims in the last like 4 years. And they're saying, you know, hey, you had $40,000 in losses. We're only charging you $1,000 for the insurance premium. It's just not profitable for us as a business to continue in this relationship. So we're canceling you to do that. And on the underwriting side, they, like we're just talking about, they could be saying, hey, your roof is 10 years old. We are, you know, it's no longer positive underwriting for us. The loss is imminent. It's going to be coming in the next year or two. So unless you get a new roof, and we're going to drop you for those reasons. So it's really 3 reasons. You know, the non-renewals based on the company exposure, the cancellations due to your losses, or that basically your home needs to update its roof or update some of the systems in its house to be favorable.
So in some cases, you're seeing homeowners being dropped or being affected in large groups, but in other cases, it may just be based on the individual's claim history.
Absolutely. Usually, from what we see, kind of the threshold is water claims is really what they pay attention to. And on some claims, some people think why a hail claim? Sometimes the insurance companies call it actually, you know, hail hit the roof, but you got water coming in, rain seepage, and it comes into your ceiling or into your living room or your bedroom or whatever. Sometimes it's coded as a water claim. And from insurance perspective, water claims are actually a lot worse than actual hail damage, because hail is considered an act of God, water's preventable. So general rule is like people who have, let's say, 2 water claims, sorry, in the last 36 months or 3 years, they're probably going to receive notice at some point, 90% of the time, that says, hey, we're dropping you, go look for insurance elsewhere. On the hail claims, usually the insurance companies couldn't drop you based on hail claims because it was considered an act of God. We can't hold you at fault, you know, for having 3 hurricanes in 3 successive years, like we stated earlier. But now more and more, the insurance companies are looking at frequency. Like if you've filed 4 claims in a 5-year period, hey, it's not profitable for us. You know, you're a huge risk to us. Therefore, we're going to drop you.
And so for those people that you hear say, and I've heard it and you've heard it, one of my not neighbors, but someone
Yes.
who lives close to me said recently, yeah, I know my roof is 13 years old. I know I need a new roof. I'm just waiting for a good storm. the problem with that is, as you've said, your insurance isn't meant to be your maintenance policy.
Exactly.
And so to wait for a good storm could mean that you get not only possibly some roof damage, but also some water damage and things like that. And what are the chances that, let's say I do get a little bit of storm damage during a hurricane, if my roof is 13 years old, are they going to completely replace it? Or are they going to say, hey, that roof is 13 years old, I'm not buying you a brand new roof?
That's a great question. And the key word there is hurricane. If there is a hurricane in the area, you should file a claim. You have a good chance of the insurance company, because they can tell, yes, there is a hurricane legitimate in the area. Same thing like a tornado coming through. Yes, absolutely file a claim. And the likelihood of you getting paid for the damage and loss to your home, it's absolutely. Now on a Friday afternoon where, a hailstorm could have happened, or maybe it didn't happen, or maybe the wind was, just blowing hard that day and your roof is, 15, 20 years old, where the lines become blurred of, is this just, your roof is old, or do you really have damage? Yes, the insurance companies are going to take a look at that. 10 years ago, insurance companies weren't sending out engineers to take a look at roofs. Even on plumbing, they weren't sending out somebody to take a look at, mold in a home. Nowadays, the insurance companies have gotten to a point, pushed to the point, almost backed into a corner, and I can't blame them, to say. So they've gone out and they have engineers on staff, and these guys are, they're paying them, thousands of dollars an hour to come out to your home, and they're professionals, and they can determine, based on just like scientific data, how old that damage on your roof is, or how old the water stain in your house is. And they've gotten really good at it, and they will have no problems. Like if you have water stains in your cabinets from, 5 years ago, or you got a stain on your ceiling from 5 years ago, they're going to say, hey, why didn't you file the claim 5 years ago? We're just not going to come in and upgrade your house. And, as we were discussing before, that line has been blurred and it's not any fault of the consumer or the homeowner. It's just been sold to them through, litigation, through roofing companies, through even insurance companies to a degree, where this is a maintenance policy instead of an insurance policy. And that line has been blurred. Homeowners insurance is not a home warranty. It's not your pest control guy. It's nothing that. It's not here to. It's not to upgrade your home. It's it's not a HELOC loan that you go out and you buy just to upgrade your loan. It's meant for catastrophic purposes, to make you whole again, not to make you better.
So you mentioned these companies backing out of the state of Florida because they just can't be profitable, or they've decided that their exposure is too great. Has this happened in the past, and what are the chances that those companies will come back at some point?
Yes, in 2006, and a lot of people who were living here at the time probably experienced that. Back in 2006, the storms were 2 years before, where we had Hurricane Charlie and 3 other hurricanes after that. And it was just devastating to Florida. Florida learned how to cope from Andrew, where back in '92, I believe it was, where yes, we can deal with a major hurricane affecting the state of Florida, and that's when they established Citizens Insurance, the wind pool in Florida, the Joint Underwriters Association, and and all that good stuff. So we can handle a major hurricane. We can't handle a Michael up in the Panhandle or an Andrew. What they didn't account for was, can we handle that 4 times in 1 year? And the answer was, we can, but there's going to be a lot of damage afterward. And in 2006, a lot of companies, and I'm talking major household brand names that you'll see the commercials on television, they just said in Florida, it's too much for us. We can't, if this happens again in 2007, we get hit with this many hurricanes, we're going to go belly up. We do not know how to handle this. And a lot of people with those household brand names started getting non-renewals in the mail. And I'm talking the biggest insurance companies in the United States, pulled out of Florida. Will they come back in? And sorry, the domestic companies that you hear and all these, everybody, it jokes around, like, well, I got this, Acme Insurance of Florida and generic insurance of Florida. Some of those companies went belly up in 2006. They went into receivership. They just couldn't handle the amount of claims, or some of them had to restructure. I would say and a good amount of companies actually started in 2006 to insure these people who couldn't get insurance anywhere else. A lot of those companies we started seeing coming back into Florida recently and over the past few years. Because the losses have gone off the books now. Now they've already paid for all those losses, and they're starting to creep back into Florida very selectively. Like maybe a company's going, well, we only want newer construction in Florida because it's less risk, or maybe we will only insure in Orange County, but not down in Tri-County because it's too risky down there. So or maybe we'll only write 100 policies per county, every month. So they've learned their lesson before, so they are coming back in, but it's a very slow migration, and the premiums they are going to be charging are going to be adequate this time and kind of match what's going on in the marketplace.
So with those large carriers leaving the state right now, we'll have fewer options.
Correct.
What will that do to the rest of our premiums? Will that affect the rest of us?
In my opinion, my best guesstimate, because the state insurance company is taking it, they've touted where they're going to be taking, the Joint Underwriters Association, they're going to be taking about a 10% increase over the next 5 years. It's going to be 50% overall, but it's going to be incremental. Usually, most of the Florida's homeowners carriers kind of follow that as kind of a guidance of, this is what, if they're doing it, we're going to be allowed to do that as well.
Right.
Some companies are taking higher rates, in the first couple of years, and will taper it down. Some will take smaller ones and taper up. So over the next 5 years, my best guesstimates, 50%, completely realistic. And I would say, in all honesty, it's probably going to be more than that. To give you an example, a 1990s home in, let's say, Orange County, probably a year or two ago, let's say 2 years ago, was about $1,200 on an average premium. Now we've seen it creep up in some areas, close to about $3,000.
How much?
And $3,000.
Wow.
Yeah, 1993 house, down in South Orlando. That's frame construction. Yeah, $3,000. So you're already seeing the impact. I live in a newer, 2010 home, and I've seen my premium creep up from $600 to about $1,200 right now, and that's only been over the past, I've been in there for 3 years. So it's not only affecting, it's going to be more so on the older construction. The newer construction won't be hit as hard. And when I'm talking about these rate increases, they're an average across the state. When I say 50%, people in Jacksonville are probably not going to be hit as hard as maybe somebody down in St. Lucie County or West Palm. They're going to be hit hard. Somebody in Naples may be hit really hard, while as opposed to somebody in Alachua or Ocala or Gainesville is not going to be hit at all. Will Central Florida be hit, where kind of our audience here is? Absolutely. Some what they call solo counties, or Seminole, Orange, Lake, and Osceola, are going to be hit the hardest, I believe.
So if I find myself in that position where I go to the mailbox or I open my email and I'm notified that either my rates have jumped up astronomically, mm-hmm. or in fact, I've been notified that I need to find a new carrier, consumers have gotten really comfortable with going online
Sure.
and finding their own car insurance, taking matters into their own hands when it comes to insurance. You see a lot of commercials for companies that say they'll give you 3 different quotes, and then you can choose your best quote. What are some of obviously we know some of the pros to doing that would be convenience. You can do it anytime, day or night. But what are some of the potential risks that consumers could face? What are some of the benefits of going with a real life person, a real life agent, when it comes to choosing a new carrier?
In Florida, the market, as you probably heard me say this before, is the insurance market down here is the wild, wild west. And it always has been. And at some points in time, it has gotten a lot worse. And we're coming off of this soft market here in Florida where rates have been, low. We didn't have hurricanes up until, Matthew's the first real hurricane we had. So rates were low and it was easy to get insurance. Companies were competing for the homeowner's business. I mean, they were going after consumers, 5 companies at a time trying to get them. Now that they're kind of backing off, a lot of what you were saying, the online market has really picked up. In our industry, we call it the InsurTech. And there's a million companies out there that are either agencies or large tech-based brokerages who are like, we'll shop your insurance with 10 insurance companies or get it through us. Sometimes it's not 2 things. Number one, sometimes it's very misleading. You may see this thing online that says Acme Insurance, and it presents itself like it's an insurance company, like I'm getting, my insurance through Acme Insurance, when Acme is actually just a agency or a brokerage to a degree, and they represent 20 different insurance companies. A lot of the time that we've seen is a lot of the insurance they're actually selling you, where you get the policy in the mail, it could be a Lloyd's, a Lloyd's syndicate policy. It could be, a commercial policy. We've seen it. So you never know what you're buying. So that's the one thing that kind of watch out for, because you got to remember, the online insurance world in our industry is new. It is just an emerging market. It's not 100% foolproof. They're still trying to figure out. Number 2 is how an agent, whether you go with, a major carrier or somebody who's an independent like me, what we do is we kind of take a look at what the consumer and what they're trying to insure, and we do all of our underwriting up front. We're asking the questions, how old is your roof? Looking for things that may be questionable to the insurer. On the InsurTech side, online, what you're running into is they're doing all of that after the fact. Their only goal is to get you on as a consumer, and it's going to be a low price. They want to get you in the door and get you on the books and get you as one of their clients. You will probably go through a big headache somewhere down the road where, number one, they're asking for this documentation, they're asking for that, and you still have a 50% chance of getting non-renewed or canceled. They are looking for big numbers to come on, not you as the individual. They're trying to hit quotas and whatnot, and you'll run into a headache somewhere down the road, like I said, with all this underwriting. Hey, by the way, you didn't tell us your roof was 10 years old. You didn't tell us that, you have a crawl space that's open. You have a tree touching your house. You name it, they're going to come up with it. And it's just a headache that you're probably going to have to endure for months afterward, unfortunately. Now, where we come into play, like I said, is most independent agents or your brand name agents, what we do is we're local to Florida. We know what the real estate environment is. We've seen the claims. We've seen what to look for. So we do everything up front so the consumer is getting a realistic premium, an adequate premium, and we don't want them to lift a finger on the back end. And that's the most important thing. We want them to get something that's in place that works and it's here for you when you need it, not to just, have to maintain it, on their own accord down the road. And that's the other thing is you will not have buying online. You do not have a representative. You do not have a liaison. You can't call up and necessarily, and then one thing I might throw in here, which everybody thinks when you call the insurance company to ask questions, you're filing a claim, whether you like it or not. If Holly, tomorrow you call your insurance company and say, hey, I think I may have hail damage, but I'm not sure. I don't know if I want to file a claim or not. Guess what? You filed a claim.
When you say you filed a claim, does that mean essentially you've raised that flag, you've raised that red flag with your insurance company, whether you actually ask for any reimbursement of funds or actually have any repairs, you've notified them that there's trouble, if you will.
Absolutely. And how, like I was talking before in this conversation of how it's coded, well, let's say they coded it as a water claim. We see loss reports all the time, what we call loss histories on we can see it on the property, but we can also see it on the client as well, where we'll bring on a new client, we'll pull the loss history on, like, let's say a property, and we'll see, you know, hurricane, 0 paid out, water, 0 paid out, water, 0 paid out, other, 0 paid out. And I'm taking a look at it and I'm like, all that represents is somebody calling the insurance company to ask questions, but now they're rendered themselves uninsurable because of their loss history. Doesn't matter if it's $1 paid out or $100,000 paid out.
So if, for example, you know, dog bites, if there's a dog bite in your front yard, if your dog bites someone, or if you have a handyman that falls off a ladder or something, and in that moment of panic, you wonder, what's my exposure going to be? And so instead of digging out your policy, you call your insurance company and say, just in case, you know, what's my deductible, or what's the process? What you're saying is, if you had an agent, you'd be able to pick up the phone and ask those questions without raising that flag with your carrier.
Yeah, exactly. For example, you said a handyman, you know, falls off the roof. You know, you call your agent. I'm asking questions like, well, can you see if this guy has workers' comp insurance? Because it would be covered under that and not your homeowner's insurance. As soon as you call your homeowner's company, they're looking at that and going, hey, it's a liability claim. There's the potential there. And when liability claims are very serious losses for insurance companies, because they can run into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So in that case, you know, like I said, I would be asking the questions to you as a client of what really happened. Can we get a certificate of insurance that he does have workers' comp? Is that the route we need to go? But like it's exactly you said, as soon, even on auto insurance, people do it all the time. You know, I have a scratch on my door, is it covered or not? Well, guess what? You filed a comprehensive claim on your auto insurance. So that is the benefit of having an agent and having an advocate on your side who can really navigate what you're covered and what you're not covered for. We'll never tell you not to file a claim because it is you own the rights to the insurance policies, but we will provide you enough guidance to make an educated decision. I mean, to give you a very quick, short example, and I remember this when I first started in the industry almost 20 years ago, we had this retired lady, and she lived next door to smaller children, and they were constantly throwing a baseball through her window. And every single time she was filing an insurance claim, and she had this low, like back in the day when they offered this, like a $250 deductible. Imagine that. So she was getting this $300 window. Well, after the 5th time, the insurance company looked at it and said, we're going to drop you. You know, this is not what the policy is designed for, and you're doing this constantly. And she asked me, you know, the honest truth, and I said, that's what they're non-renewing you for.
Yeah. And so carrying on with that example, I would imagine that would make her next policy harder to get, and her next policy probably more expensive.
Exactly. These insurance companies, just like the health insurance companies, where they have the Medical Information Bureau or life insurance. When you apply for life insurance and you get turned down, all the companies have access to the same information. So all these carriers, even the biggest to the smallest, they're all using the same system, whether it's to check your driver's license or check a loss history on your house. So they have that information, and it follows you around whether you like it or not. Are some things worse than others? Yes. I mean, like and will follow you for a lot longer? Absolutely. A sinkhole claim and a fire claim, unfortunately, in this business are what I call the kiss of death. I mean, that's going to follow you for a long time. Something like a hurricane claim or a water claim is not going to follow you as long because it's not as severe. But yes, it will affect your insurability going down the road. And companies nowadays, as we're talking about, the market being so difficult, they are scrutinizing that more and more. Now, can you get, the question probably is going to pop up, can you get insurance if you run into situations? Absolutely. Truth is, you can insure just about anything. It just comes down to who's going to take on the risk and how much money are they going to charge you.
Yeah, you can get it, but you're going to pay for it.
Exactly.
Yeah. We're joined today by Mike Tonsetic from Blanchard Insurance. Mike, how often should you update your insurance company? If I get a new water heater, do I call my insurance company? If I repave my driveway, I mean, what different types of things should I notify my residential homeowners insurance policy of? What types of things should I notify them of, and what types of things do they not really care about?
It really comes down to, and thanks for having me, by the way, Holly, and that's a great question. It really comes down to using your best judgment on the insured. And what I like to advise our clients of, and what we like to advise them here is, if you're going to paint the inside of your house or even paint the outside of your house, it really is not, it could increase the value of your house, but from an insurance standpoint, it's so negligible that we're not going to have to raise coverage on your house. If you're getting new flooring put in, or let's say, for example, you're carpeting your bedroom, recarpeting it. Well, it's not going to be a huge expense. No need to notify us. But if you're going to retile your entire house or put marble in or something customized that's going to cost you $20,000 out of pocket, absolutely notify us. Things like, I'm putting in a swimming pool. Yes. I'm putting in a new screen porch. I'm putting an addition on our house. Anything where, even new roofs, especially new roofs, because it's got a cost to it. Something that you're going to go out and say, well, I'm going to buy a new, $500 washer and dryer. There's no need to notify us. It's not going to impact the insurance. So it really comes down to, what are you doing and what's the cost on it? The more laborious the item is, like, I'm completely customizing my house, and the more expense behind it, yes, call us. And when there's a judgment call, call us. Now, it's interesting that you brought up systems and what should I call? Insurance companies really divide the systems of your home up into 4 categories. They do electric, which is going to include the wiring in your house and, generally speaking, your fuse box on the outside of your house or the circuit breakers. The roof system of your house, which is just not only the structure of your roof, but the shingle or the tiles that are on top of the structure. Your water system in your house, or your plumbing, which is going to be the inside. They care about the, what are the pipes in the walls, but they also care about how old your hot water heater is. And then when you get into heating and air, what they really care about is the condenser inside your house or inside your garage, and the unit on the outside, the compressor. So they really care about that. So if you do get and a lot of the insurance companies have thresholds or age limitations where they kind of get a little worrisome about the possibility of that impacting or making you file a claim. So on roof systems, right now in the Florida market, anything over 10 years old is where it becomes a very gray area. Hot water heaters, 15 years old is where they get worrisome. AC units that are 15 years old, they get worrisome. But if you do upgrade those systems, anything involving systems of your house that I just mentioned, the 4, definitely give us a call, because they can impact your insurability, but also impact the cost of your insurance as well.
Yeah, so unlike a home warranty, they're not asking you to replace that water heater or that air handler because they're afraid they're going to go out. That's not their concern. Their concern is that if and when they do go out, what kind of damage is it going to cause to the home that they're insuring?
Exactly, like the instance you brought up, which was the hot water heater. Well, a 15-year-old hot water heater, the possibility of a pipe that connects to it breaking, or a hole, occurring, or even if it does go out, is water going to leak out and damage the house? The insurance company, contrary to popular belief, is they actually don't insure the system itself. So, the piping inside the walls, they're not replacing that. That's a maintenance issue based on the home. Now, the resulting damage from the pipe, so the water pouring out of the pipe damaging your drywall, your flooring, your cabinetry, your furniture, carpet, or whatnot, that's their concern, and that's their responsibility to insure that.
So we talked a little bit earlier about finding your own insurance and the benefits of going through an agent. We've talked about, having a personal advocate. Auto insurance we've seen is you're as likely to see a TV commercial for auto insurance as you are for any other industry.
Yes.
Has that amount of marketing and advertising affected the insurance industry and affected how you do your job or how consumers find carriers, or has that stayed kind of on the auto insurance side of things?
I think it's spreading. The auto has, and what you're talking about right there is, what we call in the industry, what I've kind of called it for the past couple of years, is this over commoditization of the industry, where people are looking at, if I can save $20 or even $10 on my auto insurance, that's a value to me. That's the only value of the insurance, is I need to get it, and I hate to use the word cheap, but that's what's out there. I get cheaper, I get cheaper, I get cheaper. And that's historically, and it's always been that way on the auto insurance market. And if you've noticed, if you've watched any of the huge insurance companies, the brand names you see on television, where they've actually gotten away from rate. You no longer see the commercials like, you do see, we'll save you a percentage and whatnot, but it's actually gone into kind of more comical now, where it's kind of like, what am I watching? Their whole job is to put entertainment out there to get you to call to buy a policy. And yes, historically it has been, price, price, price. So I'm buying this insurance policy just to save money. That's now has bled over into other types of insurance, whether it's life insurance that you see on television, that's, hey, you're going to get this policy for, $5, which is ridiculous, or you're going to get homeowners insurance, which is cheap, cheap, cheap. And it's really turned it into a commodity. So where on the consumer end, what they're doing is you're buying a piece of paper, and the only value to it sometimes that we've seen is you're buying this cheap thing where the only value is the cost of the paper. So, hey, maybe your policy's worth, a penny per page, maybe $1, I mean, that's the whole thing. So it's really diminished the value and what the insurance is, supposed to do for you.
So with auto insurance, oftentimes people every year or every few years will change carriers just to save money. Are you seeing that on homeowners insurance policies? Are people bouncing around in the same way?
Yes. And did it used to be that way when prices were, or premiums were a lot lower? No, absolutely not. And there wasn't this big discrepancy between one company or another. Like if one company charged 1,000, the other was at 900, or the other was at 1,100. But nowadays, since there's huge discrepancies between certain policies, to give you an example, like let's say me and you are neighbors and have the exact same house. Well, let's run through some of those scenarios where, let's say, Holly, you have two water claims. So therefore you got to go with this insurance company who will take you, but they're charging you $3,000 a year for a premium. Let's say my loss history is clean and my premium is only $1,000. So the thing you're looking at, the only thing you're taking into account as the consumer is my next door neighbor who's got the same thing is paying $2,000 less. So they're not taking into an account. So we're seeing a lot of that factor in. And it's really, it's based on the individual and based on the home. But yes, we are seeing that cost is being brought into it more and more. And is it justified? In some cases, yes, but on homeowners insurance, as opposed to auto insurance, usually there is a reason for the rates.
Well, and auto insurance, not in any way to diminish its importance, because we all know that having auto insurance is important and required, to protect us, because certainly an accident, you're not only protecting yourself, but protecting the other person who may be injured in the accident, or property loss. But,
yes,
let's say you're insuring an automobile, you're insuring what, maybe up to, let's say 50 grand. You're insuring a $50,000 automobile. And so that policy, it's going to be less expensive because what you're insuring is a less expensive asset. But I think one thing that people often forget is when you're insuring your home, you're insuring a much more significant
Exactly.
investment.
Exactly.
And it's the place where you where you sleep at night. It's the place where your family lives. And so your homeowner's insurance is something that really shouldn't be taken lightly, and you really should handle with caution and care, because when you need it, boy, you really need it.
Yeah, and the sad thing is, in our industry, unfortunately, when we're talking about that, over commoditization of the, from the consumer's perspective, it's also affected on the agency force and the brokers and the agents, where they've kind of gotten into that mentality as well, and saying, well, the only way I can sell this insurance policy is to be as cheap as possible. And a lot of cases when we bring on new clients, and we're taking a look at the previous policies, or even going up and competing against somebody else, we're taking a look at some of the coverages on here and going, well, for what they're cutting out, and let's say it is $50,000 worth of your contents or your personal property or even your liability, on your side, you may be saving $10. But it's like, if your house completely burns down to the ground, wouldn't you pay the $10 to get that extra $50,000 in a scenario like that?
Yeah.
So the savings out there, to be absolutely transparent and honest, the savings to cut coverage, the savings you're receiving is so de minimis, it would make you laugh. I mean, the difference between $100,000 and $300,000 in personal liability and homeowners insurance is $20 a year. Let's put that in perspective. That's, a little bit over $1 a month. And, $300,000 in a lawsuit goes a lot farther than $100,000.
Right. So if we find ourselves in the position that you talked about earlier, where we need to find a new carrier, and hopefully we're working through an agent, or we're working with someone that we trust, what sort of things should we look for when choosing a new carrier? As you mentioned, the lowest price is certainly not always the best option, but when you're looking for new carriers, in addition to finding someone to advocate for you and help you with that search, what types of things should you look for when selecting a new carrier?
Well, it's a great question. And in being in this industry for almost 20 years and going through, the storms of 2004 and, the housing crisis of 2008, and seen and experienced everything, looking at it and I always try to look at everything from the consumer's perspective, and what am I getting for my money and what's the best value? As we said before, in 2006, after a lot of the major insurers had left the state and then are creeping back in, and should you go with them? Yes, it's an option, but then again, some of these carriers pulled out back in 2006. So is the likelihood of them doing that again, is it a possibility? Absolutely, yes. Is a company that's been in business in Florida for, or come into Florida and has only been there for the 2 years, is that your best bet? They're an option, but my question to that would be, have they been through the hurricanes? How's their claims experience? How's their history? Were they, able to stay afloat? Were they paying out claims? So, and I hate to say it, but all insurance companies are not created equal. I'm not going to name names here, but yes, there are companies that are better at handling claims than others. And it's just, and it's sometimes you don't want to be with the smallest insurance company. Sometimes you don't want to be with the biggest insurance company. So when a consumer, a lot of it, unfortunately, is on our side of the industry, where it's, well, the AM Best rating is the best thing in the world, or this company is the biggest and the baddest. And it's not necessarily the best choice for a lot of consumers out there. I say, take a look at the consumer. If cost is your only concern, well, get the lowest cost. But if you really want, which I want you to have, is some value to this insurance policy, which is its ability to pay claims when you need it and not go through the hassle. this is the insurance company I recommend. Take online reviews with a grain of salt, because I know we've talked about this in other conversations that, people will leave a good review if they buy a new golf club they like. But they're not going, just because they bought a good homeowners insurance policy, they're not going to write a positive review. So every review you're going to read online about insurance company is probably going to be negative. The homeowners insurance companies I would look for, number one, is how long have they been operating in the state of Florida and how well did they do? Are they financially solid? And these financials, you can go onto the carrier sites and look them up. And they don't have to be a $250 billion company. I mean, if they're a $200 million company, that may be good. So a company that's been around since like the late 90s, and is still in business in Florida, you can say they've done a pretty good job. They've mitigated all this, over the past, 25 years or plus. The other thing you want to look at is what they are insuring. A lot of companies that we've noticed who come into Florida and go down to Miami-Dade County, Tri-County, because the premiums are so huge down there. Yes, premiums are $10,000 and they're writing a ton of business down there, means, they're not properly managed, because the next Hurricane Andrew hits or whatever, the Bahamas hurricane sneaks over and trashes Miami, they're going to be in a lot of financial trouble. So a lot of the companies I like are, companies that they may not be the coastal insurer. They may not be the high value insurer. They're conservative about what they write, what type of business they take on. And those companies who have solid underwriting like that tend to fare the best during these catastrophic events that we have.
Do you anticipate commercial insurance also being affected?
Absolutely, and it already has begun. And it's even before COVID actually has, with the big debate of whether business income covers commercial insurance is obviously a hot topic before, but it's been coming for a long time in Florida. A lot of your brand name carriers over the past 10 years have been reducing their exposure in Florida. So for example, let's say your business owner's policy, Holly, let's say for the BBB, a company like 5 years ago may have said, well, we'll insure your general liability, but we don't want your property insurance. Recently, my insurer, we have several offices throughout the state that and I'm in the business. They came out and said, well, your office in Tampa, we don't want to insure the property there anymore. You're okay in Orlando. So we've seen a lot of that going on. And we thought that was only in the household, the biggest insurance companies, the household brand names. We thought it would only affect that, but recently we've seen what they call the excess and surplus lines of market in Florida, which is generally has been reserved for more riskier business. So the roofers of the world, huge buildings along the coast, condo associations and whatnot. We thought were written on some of these companies you've never heard of, but are some of the biggest insurance companies in the world on the back end. We thought they would stay in Florida, but we're actually seeing a lot of them pulling out of the state. And it's not necessarily hurricanes, property damage, but they're also being affected by the litigation and the fraud and whatnot. I haven't seen as much commercial general liability claims in 20 years as I've seen in the past 2 years. Slip and falls are on the rise. A lot of things that were a result of like movements like the Me Too movement, for example. Sexual harassment claims in insurance were unheard of. Now they seem to be occurring almost daily. Things like that we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of litigation in areas we've never seen happen before, and most recently COVID with the business interruption coverage. That's going to be a huge thing that comes down. So yes, we're seeing in Florida, in states like California, not only Florida, states like Texas, California, Florida, New York is probably next on the list, but yes, it is affecting commercial insurance big time in Florida.
Yeah. Mike Tonsetic from Blanchard Insurance, thank you so much for
Absolutely.
joining us today. Like I said, I don't think most of us think of insurance being as interesting as it can be, but there are certainly so many nuances to the industry that I appreciate your time. I appreciate how much passion you have for this.
Absolutely.
There are so many nooks and crannies and and things that a regular consumer, you know, we can't be as knowledgeable, and really need professionals like you out there to keep an eye on the industry to better help to protect us. So I appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
And thanks so much.
Yeah, and if I can leave it just with one final thought,
Sure.
you know, going out there to the consumers, ask questions. And I know our industry is designed where it's like, buy this policy and don't ask questions. Please, whether you know you're a client of ours or a client of a company or anywhere, call the agent or broker and ask questions. And we love it when you ask questions. Sometimes we sound like an encyclopedia when we're talking about it, but call us and tell us to put it in layman's terms. Don't, you know, when you hear us talking about reinsurance and co-insurance, just be like, Mike, lay it out for me, put it in layman's terms, and we will.
Well, and one thing that Better Business Bureau reminds consumers of all the time is, you know, if you have questions and you don't get them answered, or if in this case, if the agent or the agency doesn't make time to answer your questions, consider yourself warned, because when you really need
Exactly.
them, they may not make time for you and they may not be responsive. So when you have questions up front, pay attention to how responsive they are, how complete they are
Absolutely.
in their response, because that could really be very telling for your experience in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And feel free to test them. I mean, we tell that to our clients. We test us with our knowledge, test us with our time, and test us with our experience.
Yeah. Thanks so much for joining us, Mike Tonsetic, President and CEO of Blanchard Insurance, BBB accredited business for over 10 years. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks so much, Holly. Take care.
Bye-bye.